A few times in these videos, I've referenced digital signatures, but I haven't really expanded on the subject so as to not confuse you. I wanted to make sure I laid out the groundwork and all the prerequisites so that when we finally got to the digital signature aspect, you would completely understand it and be able to grasp it in the sense that Bitcoin uses them. Similar to a handwritten signature on a check that we use to verify a transaction and prove that the sender is approving that transaction, Bitcoin uses digital signatures in a similar way. These digital signatures provide three key features for the decentralized blockchain. Number one, data integrity. When a transaction gets sent to a node, the node can verify that the sender's message wasn't changed along the way, because any modification in the message would produce a completely different digital signature. Authentication. As long as the sender's private key is kept in secret, the receiver can use the sender's public key to confirm that the digital signature was created by the sender and no one else. Non-repudiation. Once the signature has been generated, the sender is unable to deny having signed it. Similar to a handwritten signature on a check or contract, a digital signature for Bitcoin acts as the final approval of a transaction from the sender side and is difficult to copy or forge. But unlike a handwritten signature that remains the same with every new check or contract or transaction, a digital signature is a little different. It's unique to every single Bitcoin transaction. There's a one-to-one relationship, meaning a new transaction produces a new digital signature every single time. It is created using the data in the message or transaction that the signature is verifying. The digital signature gets sent to the public. The entire world has access to it. It is created using the sender's private key, but it does not reveal the private key. It is way harder or nearly impossible to copy or forge because of these several things. Let's take a look at some basic conceptual examples to give you an idea of what I mean with digital signatures and their uniqueness by using the data within the transaction to create it. What you're looking at here is the standard check that somebody would write to somebody else. Here I entered some of the data pieces that the check would cover. For example, date and sender, Martin Luther King Jr.'s bank account, number 1234, receiver Kendrick Lamar's bank account, number 4321, and the message being bank account number 1234 sends $1,000 to bank account number 4321 on this date and time. Signed by Martin Luther King Jr. himself. So this is what a paper check that we use represents. It represents the sender verifying to send the funds to a certain person on a certain date. Now, Bitcoin digital signatures work a little different, as I already said. We would use the same data pieces, right? So same date and time. Sender would be Bitcoin address number 1234. And obviously the address wouldn't really read like this. But again, this is just for conceptual purposes. Receiver, Bitcoin address number 4321. And the message being Bitcoin address number 1234 sends $1,000 worth of Bitcoin to Bitcoin address number 4321 on August 13th, 2020 at 2:01 p.m. Now, Martin Luther King Jr., being the sender, would encrypt this message with his private key, which would then give us this digital signature. Okay? Now, let's look at the digital signature because it's important that you understand that the message is actually a part of the digital signature. So, the message is this, right? Bitcoin address 1234 sends 1,000 worth of blah, 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 2:01 p.m. Now look at the digital signature that I have conceptualized for this example. the message is directly tied into it. And what's very important to note is that the time is directly tied into it. So the time that the transaction was processed is a key part of the digital signature. So some of this will be repeat, but let's go through it. Bitcoin digital signatures are unique to every Bitcoin transaction. Every new transaction produces a new digital signature. And that is because it's created using the data in the message. So each different transaction has different data. For example, timestamp, who's sending it, how much is being sent, who's receiving. All of these kind of things are data pieces that go into the digital signature. As we already discussed, elliptic curve math forms a permanent linkage between the private key and public key, which then lends itself to the permanent linkage of the digital signature with the public key and private key as well. As previously stated with the check example, is that the private key is used to encrypt the message or digital signature, and the public key is used to decrypt it, meaning the private key is never revealed along the way. The sender sends a digital signature that was created with the private key, and the public can use that sender's public key to ensure that the digital signature is tied directly to that private key. These digital signatures are the last step to authorize Bitcoin to be released from a public key or the address, and the correct private key must be known and present to create a digital signature that will release the funds from that address. So in the previous video, we had this example where I said I wanted to send you 2 Bitcoin, and I showed you that the transactions aren't really from a balance or depleting a balance, but more so Bitcoin network focuses on inputs and outputs. So this screen is a repeat, but I'm going to add a special part to show you how the digital signature is tied into all of this. So first off, all unspent outputs are locked by a script that sets forth certain requirements that must be satisfied for the coins to be sent or unlocked. That's what this represents. This represents the Bitcoin network laying out certain terms that must be met for this Bitcoin to actually be sent. The primary requirement is that the digital signature proves the sender owns the private key that created the address that was derived from the public key that is holding the unspent outputs. Since unspent outputs are locked to addresses, and addresses are linked to public keys, which are directly linked to private keys, all unspent outputs are directly linked to a private key. For a sender to send Bitcoin, the sender must prove to the blockchain that he or she owns the private key that created the address holding the unspent outputs. The nodes can publicly verify the digital signature using the sender's public key, without the sender having to reveal his or her private key to the world. The digital signature can get sent to the world, and the world can verify, yes, the person that created this digital signature owns the private key that is linked to this public key. But they will never, ever, ever know what the private key actually is. And that's the magic of the digital signature. That's the magic of the DS portion of the ECDSA. It's what enables the private key, public key cryptography to facilitate the blockchain and facilitate Bitcoin transactions without senders ever having to reveal their private key. It is what keeps private keys private and allows senders to authorize transactions. And it's important to note that senders don't actually do a mechanism that creates the digital signature. The wallets contain the software that create the digital signatures. The wallets create the private and public keys. And with every transaction that you try to send through the wallet, it will create the corresponding digital signature that matches up with those keys and matches with the data that is being sent. So all of this advanced stuff isn't really being done by a person per se. It's being done by the wallet software. So when I say somebody signs a digital signature on a transaction, it's not as if I'm really going in and doing computer science and cryptography to add this digital signature. No, the wallet software automatically does it with every transaction that gets sent. But